Yo, what's going on, Dragon Ballers? Welcome back to another deck profile. Today we have the first place list from the Card Market European event that took place over the weekend. 188 players, so pretty good stats in my opinion. And yeah, Trunks takes first place here. This is the first time I believe we've seen that yellow Trunks, or a yellow deck in general, has taken first place in this format, which is pretty exciting. I actually feel like I learned a lot about Trunks over the past week, and I'll talk about that as we go through the profile. But yeah, shout out to Jan, who's the player that won this event with this deck. He did send me notes, but of course, on the day that I needed to record this video, Facebook Messenger went down. So I'm going to go through his profile, and I'm going to post his notes in the pinned comment down in the description when I'm able to actually access that. So make sure to check that out. That'll list his matchups and some of their thoughts as they went through the deck and the tournament. So with that being said, we'll get into this. If you're new here, make sure to subscribe, hit that bell so you don't miss a video. And of course, if you guys want to support the channel, many links down in the description to do so. But if you want to buy or pre-order any of the cards in today's video, really does help out if you want to use my TCG player link in the description. Anyways, let's get started. You guys all know the leader by now. Get that early awaken with a Vegeta on board, and then you have the inherent double strike on the back. Draw a card when you EX evolve, as well as when you swing, and you can revive your 1-drops from the drop area. So firstly, we have 4 Vegetas and 3 Trunks. This is a ratio that I've been seeing in a lot of lists as of late, and it makes sense to me. You want the Vegetas earlier because it is your alternate awakening condition. The Vegetas can always fetch the Trunks if you need it, and Trunks is still important, but again, at 3 copies, you should see it when you need it. Although I do definitely see the case for 4 because you want to be setting up your Trunks blocker as early as possible. We'll get to that in a minute. So next up, we have 4 copies of Vegeta Future on the line. Not only is this card incredible for removing anything ignoring barrier, it just triggers your leader to draw a card, and it also replaces itself. So this deck can build up a pretty nice hand. I've said many times, not quite as big as Icarus, but I mean, Icarus was kind of broken for a reason, right? So this is making sense here. And then 4 copies of Trunks Future on the line. So I can see where it's a little awkward to play 3 1-drop Trunks and 4 of the evolved Trunks, but again, I think it does make sense. Vegeta can fetch it, so a lot of times your turn 1 will be Vegeta into Trunks. And now with that, you're gonna get awakened by turn 2, so you'll pretty much always have your 1-drop to revive whenever you're ready to evolve. So that makes sense to me there. And this card, man, like I played in a locals last week, and I played Blue Yellow Soul Striker, and I have my profile coming out for that in the next couple days. But basically, what I want to talk about in regards to this card is such a crank, such a strong card against decks that don't have a free play or cheap way to bait it out. And Soul Striker is one of those decks. Like, you have to commit so much energy, like 2 or more energy, which in this case is a lot, into this card, and just get your card rested, and then you can't really do much else for the rest of the turn. Again, that doesn't apply to all decks. Like King Piccolo, of course you can play something for free or for 1 and then, you know, bait this effect out. That's great, but some decks just don't have that luxury, and this card definitely shines against those. And being barrier blocker, mostly barrier, that makes it very, very pesky to remove. Alright, then we have 2 copies of SSB Vegeta and SS Trunks Father-Son Bonds. So this is the in-archetype boss monster, and I think it is a very, very strong card. Offers you removal on 2 rest mode battle cards, which now like every yellow card in the game does. But the other thing is it's critical, triple strike, play it for 2, so it comes down very, very cheap. Not in EX Evolve though, so it doesn't really draw with your leader, which is a little unfortunate. But like, this was a best of 1 event, and this is a card that I think is really good in the current meta because blue and yellow are not necessarily overly popular. Don't get me wrong though, it's still very likely you'll play against at least like 1 or 2 blue or yellow decks throughout the course of your tournament, especially in 8 rounds. So with that in mind, this card is a little risky, but I mean, in those matchups you can always charge it. Where this card really shines though is against red and green, because they don't have any means of truly interacting with this card, right? Like, it's too big to get hit by Frieza Charismatic Villain. Red can't do virtually anything to it. Black, it's not bad, but they can use Petrification and stop its skills. But I mean, it does have Activate Battle, although I guess the next turn it'll still be negated as well, and it'll probably get removed. So yeah, I mean, it's good into black if you can force them to tap out with other cards pressuring them. But yeah, I mean, with red being as popular as it is right now, this card does seem like a worthy main deck in my opinion. Then we have 2 copies of Trunks Unison, just one of the best yellow cards, no surprise there. Then we have 4 copies of Krillin Super Combo, 1 copy of Power of a Super Saiyan. So this is going to start our extra card lineup. It's always interesting to see what these different yellow decks are playing as far as an extra card lineup goes. So 1 Power. We have 3 Black Kamehameha, which I do like this number more and more. I think this card's really strong, but sometimes in a mono yellow deck, that 1 energy can be quite costly. But still, I mean, for the 1 energy, drawing the card and then tapping 2 battle cards, as well as like serving as removal on your turn if you need it to, that is really solid. Although most of the time you should be using this defensively because, again, your deck is just like chock full of removal already. And that's kind of the thing about this format. Like, most decks have a lot of removal, which is definitely pretty interesting. But anyways, 2 copies of Final Flash makes sense. 2 copies of Frieza Army. This is one that a lot of people play 3 of. I don't mind 2. I don't mind 3 either. It's just the fact that it's your free extra card now that power is limited to 1. But still, I mean, 2, definitely a fine ratio. And then we have 2 Forbidden Power. So in a best of 1, I definitely like Forbidden Power in the main deck. I've said it a few times, we're definitely trending more towards an aggressive meta. So Forbidden Power, especially being a floodgate that your opponent cannot interact with, more so looking at red decks. They have Vegeta Resolve Renewed and Broly Crown Retribution to mess with your robotic riposts. This is a great main deck tech. And I love the fact too that it has that offensive capability to be comboed with. That's where this card probably shines over Nimbus. Where Nimbus, you're pitching the extra card to actually stop the attack, but you don't have the flexibility that Forbidden Power offers you. And Forbidden Power not negating the attack can also lead to some great combos. Like you can, negate with Forbidden Power, use Power of a Super Saiyan to rest the Unison, or you could use Black Kamehameha to rest more battle cards. If you played Zamasu Super Combo, which I've seen in some Trunks lists, you could rest their leader. But yeah, it can open up some pretty interesting combos for you. Then we have 4 Riposte and 4 Steadfast Goku, of course. That's basically the reason why we're playing yellow extra cards, not only because they're good cards themselves, but because they allow your Gokus and your Friezas to become 1 cost. But I mean, yeah, more and more cards nowadays are able to interact with Robotic Riposte. So I mean, it's still super worth, still a 1-drop 15k, still floodgates most opponents, but yeah, against red, that's where Forbidden Power definitely comes in clutch. Then we have 3 copies of Turles All Too Easy. A little surprised to not see 4 copies. I think this is a 53 card list, and this is one of the cards that I would want to max out on. But I mean, again, your deck is full of removal. 3 copies definitely seems like a good number. 2 copies of Cooler, definitely, I mean, I don't know. I don't want to say a high number. It's not like it's 3 or 4 copies, but like a lot of lists play 1, and there's not too many like hyper control decks in this meta, but maybe people are kind of gearing up for like the Invokers of the world, or maybe SS4 Vegeta ramps and things like that. This meta, which we covered in a previous video, definitely had some higher end control decks, whereas like I guess in like American metas we're not seeing the crazy control decks really doing all that well. So maybe in Europe that makes a little bit more sense, but I mean, 2 Cooler, can't necessarily go wrong with it. 2 copies of Basil Fatal Rampage makes sense. This does lead me to bring up though that there is no Bergamo in this list, which I'm a little surprised about. I think that would be a good card to play, especially because your Trunks blocker procs it very easily. But I mean, in a one of that can sometimes be hard to set up, I guess. I mean, I would have played it, but still, like, they chose not to play it here. Just want to point that out. 1 copy of Max Power makes a lot of sense to me. Sometimes it can be tough to get that Sin 9-drop rested, for example, so you want to have just a one-off spot removal for it. And then, you know, of course you can recur it as a negate turn after turn after turn if you're setting up a drop area. 1 copy of Secret ID. This is the Overwhelm that definitely makes sense, you know, as being a yellow deck. Although I will say, like, there's so much removal in yellow nowadays that like maybe you can just go with Fighting Against Fate, but I mean, having removal for cards that you can't necessarily rest at will makes sense, and that's, I'm sure, where Max Power comes in, and that's where Secret ID comes in. Then we have 2 copies of Poutine the Dark Sorcerer. I mean, yeah, again, makes sense. A lot of yellow lists nowadays are playing 1 copy, which I could definitely see being viable here. Again, only because it's a 53 card list. Might want to chop it down a bit for consistency, and you can only play once the board. That's kind of the logic as to why a lot of people play 1 copy nowadays. But yeah, I mean, they chose to play 2 here. It must have worked out. And then we have the SCR, Cell Xeno. Now, this is very, very interesting because we haven't seen Cell Xeno in most topping deck lists for a long time. But there was a time where all yellow decks and all green decks pretty much played it. And of course, that was probably before like Supreme Kai of Time existed or Pan existed. But I mean, in this deck, it does make a lot of sense because you don't necessarily have like a huge game-ending boss monster. I mean, yes, you have Father-Son Bonds, but we just got done talking about how it is rather susceptible against things like blue, yellow, and sometimes even black. So having the Cell Xeno with the Deflect makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it's still susceptible to some counter plays and some counter attacks, but I mean, taking those 3 cards out of your opponent's hand, you have the easy math for it with a lot of your cards. So I actually do really like this SCR choice in this deck, but again, I don't think you can go wrong with Pan. I don't think you can go wrong with Supreme Kai of Time, especially we might be moving towards a bit more of a Unison reliant meta if set 17 has anything to say about it, just with like the red reveals that we've seen so far. At least for the Goku GT deck, Unison seems very important. So I mean, there are many great SCRs you could play, and this is not a deck I would recommend if you're on a budget necessarily, but of course if you are on a budget, Heroine's Lineage should serve pretty well. But anyways, guys, yep, that's their list here. I like it overall. Very solid list. Again, I will post those notes in the pinned comments as soon as I'm able to access their notes that they sent me. Thanks for watching, guys, and thank you to Jan and Mert for getting me this deck list. I'll see you guys in the next video.